I hadn't planned on attending a séance that evening. The advertisement in the paper caught my eye only because it mentioned contacting those lost souls of the departed. I felt determined to commune with the souls that had haunted me since Angel Meadow to uncover their intentions. The medium's parlour sat wedged between a pawnbroker and a tobacconist, its windows masked by heavy velvet curtains. I paid my shilling to a grim-faced man at the door and stepped into gloom thick enough to taste. The room reeked of incense and cheap perfume, candles guttered in brass holders, their light barely penetrating the murk. Around an oval table sat 8 people, widows mostly, clutching handkerchiefs, eyes bright with desperate hope. I took the last empty chair, my cane propped against my knee. "Welcome, seekers," intoned a woman at the head of the table. Madame Bellamy. Her face was powdered white, lips painted crimson, grey-streaked hair pulled back severely from her forehead. "The veil grows thin tonight." A bell tinkled somewhere. The candles dimmed further. My thumb discreetly checked my pocket watch. Running slow. Interesting. "Join hands," she commanded, "that we might form an unbroken circle for the spirits to enter." I complied, feeling clammy fingers grasp mine on both sides. "I sense a presence," Madame Bellamy whispered. "Someone watches from beyond." On cue, raps sounded from beneath the table. 1, 2, 3. The widow beside me gasped. "Spirit, make yourself known." A shadow flickered in the corner of the room. Something translucent and vaguely human-shaped coalesced, its edges blurring into the darkness. It moaned, a hollow, distant sound. "Thomas," it whispered. The circle erupted. A woman sobbed. "That's my Thomas." I remained silent, watching the spirit while my eyes adjusted to the darkness. There, a thin wire running along the ceiling, and there, a slight distortion in the glass of a mirror, angled toward the corner. "Another presence approaches," Madame Bellamy announced, her eyes rolling back dramatically. "A man of the law, taken before his time." My jaw tightened. "Constable James Harwick wishes to speak." Her voice changed, deepened. "Is there anyone here who knew me in life?" "I did," I said quietly. The medium's eyes found mine. "Ah, yes, he speaks of you. He says, you blame yourself for his death." "Does he now?" I did not blame myself. He died chasing a pickpocket and falling downstairs through Ancoats. He forgives you for not being there that night. I stood abruptly in my chair, scraping back. Harwick died at 10:30 in the morning. I was standing 3 feet from him when he fell. Without warning, I lunged across the room and used my cane to yank aside a heavy curtain to reveal a narrow alcove. Inside crouched a young man, frantically working a contraption of mirrors and what appeared to be a small phonograph. "No!" Madame Bellamy shrieked. I turned to the stunned audience. Mirrors and recorded voices, the oldest tricks in the book. Chaos erupted. Women screamed. Men shouted. Madame Bellamy pointed a trembling finger at me. You are cursed. The spirits curse those who mock their realm." 2 burly men appeared from a side door. One grabbed my collar, while the other twisted my cane from my grasp. "Out with you," the first growled. They hustled me through the parlour and shoved me roughly into the street. Rain soaked me instantly as my bad leg gave way, sending me sprawling into a puddle. "Stay away," the larger man warned, tossing my cane beside me. "Madam doesn't take kindly to disruptions." The door slammed shut. I dragged myself upright, leaning heavily on my cane, water streaming down my face. But not before I'd seen what the medium's assistant had dropped in his panic. A list of names and personal details, including Constable Harwick, bell chasing suspect, police colleague. Someone had been researching me. The rain drove needles into my face as I limped away from Madame Bellamy's establishment, my cane slipping on the slick cobblestones. Each step sent daggers of pain through my shattered knee, a constant reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. Water sluiced down the gutters, carrying away the city's fill. I paused beneath a hissing gas lamp, its light fractured by raindrops. This was my lot now, trudging from one charlatan to another, seeking genuine glimpses of what lurked beyond the veil. Not these theatrical performances designed to fleece the grieving, but something real. Something like what I'd seen at Angel Meadow, at Longbourn. The boy's face flashed in my memory, gaunt, solemn, those pale grey eyes reflecting firelight as he pulled me from the inferno. No ordinary child, that one. He'd known exactly where to find me, exactly when to appear. And that sigil he'd scratched into the brick, different from the others. A ward, perhaps. Protection. I'd sketched it a dozen times since that night, trying to decipher its meaning. The lines felt significant under my fingertips, as if they might rearrange themselves into answers if I traced them enough times. My flat welcomed me with damp silence. I lit the lamp with trembling fingers, hung my sodden coat by the meagre fire, and settled at my desk. The notebook lay open to my drawing of the boy's sigil. Beside it, newspaper clippings, pennyman's articles, each more mocking than the last. Uncanny Uskwood claims demonic forge. Former inspector disrupts funeral, claims corpse still walking. The mad detective, a city's shame. My fingers traced the sigil again. The boy had known. Somehow, he'd seen what I saw. Proof I wasn't alone in this. Proof I wasn't mad. Beneath a stack of my research and cuttings lay my unopened mail, delivered no doubt by Mrs. Finch. I expected the usual selection of disturbed individuals, glory-seeking writers desperate for inspiration, or those who are clearly frauds seeking fame. But on top lay a letter that appeared different from the rest. The paper felt heavy, expensive. Inside, elegant handwriting flowed across the page. Inspector Uskwood, you seek answers in a city of lies. I have watched you chase shadows through parlor tricks and frauds. You search for truth where others peddle comfort. I am not Madame Bellamy. I do not conjure ghosts from hidden wires and powdered sheets. What I offer is rarer, a genuine glimpse beyond. I have read Mr. Penniman's articles. I know what they call you, but I also know what you saw in Angel Meadow, what you felt at Longbourn. Come tomorrow at midnight. No audience, no performance, just answers. 16 Blackthorn Lane, rear entrance. Miss Thorne. I read it twice, searching for the trap. Anyone could have learned about Angel Meadow from gossip. Longbourn was in all the papers, but something in the precise wording gave me pause. She hadn't written, what they say you saw, just what you saw. As if she knew. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it between the pages of my notebook. A genuine medium? Unlikely. But if there was even the slightest chance, if she could help me understand what connected these events, what drew me to them, I would be at Blackthorn Lane tomorrow night. I arrived as the church bells tolled midnight. The street lay deserted, windows dark and shuttered against the night. Number 16 stood apart from its neighbours, with a gabled roof that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. The rear entrance, as instructed, led through an overgrown garden. My cane sank into the soft earth with each step, making my progress even more laborious than usual. A thin ribbon of light outlined a door at the back of the house. I knocked once, and it swung open immediately, as if someone had been waiting with hand on latch. Inspector Uskwood. Miss Thorne's voice reached me before my eyes adjusted to the gloom. You came alone. Good. The parlour was small and suffocating, heavy with the acrid scent of burning herbs. Candles guttered in wall sconces, their flames dancing erratically despite the absence of any draught. Every mirror in the room had been covered with black cloth, creating odd shadows where reflections should have been. Please, sit. She gestured to a round table in the centre of the room. I studied her as I lowered myself into the chair, She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 30, with pale skin that seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, watching my every movement with unnerving intensity. "You're skeptical," she said, not a question. "I've seen too many tricks, and too many truths disguised as tricks." She sat opposite me, hands folded on the table. No rings, but her fingertips were stained with ink. "The veil between worlds grows thin in places, Inspector. You felt it. At Angel Meadow, at Longburn. The spirits call to those who can hear them." I glanced around the room, professional instinct cataloguing details. Strange marks scored the walls near the ceiling. Symbols perhaps, though different from those I'd seen before. Shallow alcoves punctuated the wainscoting near the floor, their purpose unclear. And beneath it all, barely perceptible, a low hum vibrated through the floorboards. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To show you what you seek." She lit a small brazier on the table. Sweet smoke billowed upward. "Join hands with me." I hesitated, then placed my palms against hers. Her skin felt cool and dry. "Close your eyes," she whispered. I didn't. Instead, I watched as she began to sway, her lips moving in silent incantation. The candles dimmed, though I couldn't see how. The hum beneath the floor intensified. "They're coming," she murmured. "Can you feel them?" The smoke from the brazier thickened, curling into shapes that almost resembled human forms. In the uncovered portion of the glass-fronted cabinet, ghostly faces seemed to form and dissolve. Voices whispered from the corners of the room, fragments of sentences, names, pleas. "Margaret," one voice called clearly, the name of Mrs. Caldwell's infant. "Danger." I stiffened. That case was not public knowledge. Miss Thorne's eyes snapped open, black in the dim light. "You see, they know you, Inspector. They've been watching." But I'd spotted it now. The slight distortion in the glass pane, the way the smoke was being channeled toward it, and that hum. I'd heard something similar before, in a theatre production that used resonating chambers to create the illusion of disembodied voices. I released her hands and stood. "Enough." "What are you doing?" Her voice sharpened. I crossed to the largest alcove near the floor, ran my fingers along its edge, and found what I expected, a latch. The panel swung open, revealing a small speaking tube. "An echo chamber beneath the floorboards," I said, turning back to her. "Clever. The glass in that cabinet is treated to reflect images when heated, and that's what the brazier's for. And I'd wager those covered mirrors are angled to project shadows when uncovered at the right moment." Her face transformed, beauty hardening into something sinister. "You fool," she intoned. "You see the theatre, the display I use to heighten the message. You think you understand what you're seeing. You think this is all tricks. I am no fraud, Mr. Uskwood. I see the dead, I hear them speak, and they speak a lot about you. No, Miss Thorne, if that's even your real name. I think you've researched me thoroughly, learned about my cases, set this up to convince me you had genuine abilities." She stood so violently her chair toppled backward. "Get out. I came for truth." "Truth?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You wouldn't recognize truth if it slit your throat in the night. The signs are everywhere, and you with your broken leg and your little notebook, think you can catalogue them like butterfly specimens." She advanced on me, finger jabbing toward my chest. "The veil is tearing, Inspector, and you're too blind to see it. I am trying to warn you to pass on their message before they curse every bone in your miserable body." I backed toward the door, unwilling to turn my back on her. As I reached the threshold, she called after me. "They're coming for you, Alaric Uskwood, and when they do, remember that I offered you sight and you chose blindness." I reached for the doorknob, eager to escape Miss Thorne's venomous accusations, but as my fingers touched the brass, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath clouded before me, and frost spiderwebbed across the floorboards with a crackling hiss. What the devil? A sound like a struck crystal goblet pierced the air. I turned to see hairline fractures racing across every mirror in the room. Those still draped in black cloth were uncovered by invisible hands. The cracks multiplied, spreading in patterns that resembled the sigils I'd seen at Longburn. The ringing intensified until it felt like needles in my ears. "Stop this," I demanded, though I knew this was no parlour trick. Miss Thorne stood rigid in the centre of the room, her mouth frozen in a perfect O of surprise. Then, slowly, horribly, her feet lifted from the floor. 1 inch, then 2, then 6, her body rising as if pulled by invisible strings. Miss Thorne? Her head snapped toward me with unnatural speed, the irises of her eyes bleached to white, like paper soaked in lye. A harsh light pulsed from nowhere and everywhere, casting multiple shadows that moved independently of their sources. My leg throbbed with familiar pain, the same agony I'd felt in Angel Meadow. I fumbled for my walking stick, gripping the concealed silver spike within. "What are you?" I whispered. The furniture began to vibrate. Books flew from shelves, pages riffling in a wind that shouldn't exist. The small table overturned, splintering against the wall. Candles exploded into fountains of blue-white flame that scorched the ceiling before guttering out. Miss Thorne's body jerked like a marionette, limbs twisting at impossible angles. Her mouth stretched wider than human jaws should allow, and thick ether streamed forth. Not smoke, not vapor, but something that seemed to bend the light around it, creating pockets of absolute darkness. I'd seen frauds, charlatans, and madmen. I'd documented the unexplainable, catalogued the impossible, but this was primal terror made manifest. The voice that came didn't originate from Miss Thorne's throat. It rasped from the very air, seeming to originate from all directions at once. "Seek the boy, for he holds the answers." The words vibrated through my bones, the same voice I'd heard in the tenement, the same whisper that sometimes called from my mirror at night. What boy? I demanded, though I suspected I already knew. Miss Thorne's suspended body convulsed violently. Her spine arched backward with a sickening series of cracks, one vertebra after another snapping like twigs underfoot. Her arms splayed outward, fingers curled into claws that scraped gouges in the air itself. The patterns align, the doors open. Find him. "Who are you?" I shouted over the cacophony of breaking glass and splintering wood. "What doors?" No answer came. Instead, Miss Thorne's body gave one final, horrific spasm. Her neck twisted a full half circle. The sound of gristle and bone separating echoed obscenely in the small room. Then, like a puppet with cut strings, she collapsed to the floor. In the moment before she struck the ground, a final burst of strange light flashed through the room, from within her very flesh, as if her skin had become momentarily translucent. I glimpsed, just for an instant, a lattice of golden light beneath her skin, arranged in patterns that matched the sigils in my notebook. Then, darkness. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the door, heart hammering against my ribs. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the settling of disturbed objects. The room was a shambles, furniture shattered, books torn, mirrors reduced to glittering dust on the floor. And at the centre of it all, Miss Thorne lay motionless, her limbs bent at angles that defied anatomy, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. I forced myself forward, kneeling beside her despite the protest from my bad leg. I pressed fingers to her throat, seeking a pulse I knew wouldn't be there. Her skin was already cooling, as if she'd been dead for hours rather than seconds. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I knew it wasn't my fault. Or was it? Had my presence somehow triggered this? Had my skepticism unleashed whatever force had taken her? I reached into my coat for my notebook, then hesitated. What would I write? What could I possibly record that would make sense of this horror? Instead, I closed her staring eyes and arranged her twisted limbs as best I could into a more dignified position. I rose unsteadily to my feet. I knew it was my duty to report this, but I also knew what would occur. The police would see only a broken body and a destroyed ruin. They'd remember Uncanny Uskwood and his tales of demons at Angel Meadow. They'd lock me away before I finished speaking. I could think of no other way, even though this was my burden to bear, my mystery to unravel. I limped to the door, pausing only to glance back at Miss Thorne's corpse. In death, she looked smaller, fragile, a vessel emptied of whatever power had briefly filled her. I'll find the truth, I promised her, whatever it costs. I spent the night in a cell, hunched on a hard bench, staring at walls I'd once patrolled past with a copper's confident stride. The irony was not lost on me. Inspector becomes suspect. The headline Pennyman would surely love. They'd found me as I was leaving the house, to report the incident myself. The neighbours had heard the commotion, the screams, the shattering glass. By the time I'd gathered my wits to leave, the constables arrived, faces I recognised, but who looked at me with strangers' eyes. Uskwood, Sergeant Bellows had said, his moustache twitching with distaste. Should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Morning brought the interrogation room. Inspector Hadley sat across from me, his pen scratching across the statement form. I'd known him before my disgrace, a methodical man who believed in evidence above all else. Let's try again, he sighed, massaging his temples. You claim Miss Thorne, a woman half your size, destroyed her own parlour, floated in mid-air, spoke in voices, then died of what exactly? I've told you what happened. You've told me ghost stories. Hadley's voice hardened. A woman is dead, Alaric. Dead with a broken neck and contusions that suggest violence. I never touched her. Then explain the state of the ruin. Explain her injuries. I couldn't. Not in a way he'd accept. Not without sounding exactly like the madman they all believed me to be. Something came through her, I said finally. Something used her to deliver a message. Hadley's pen stopped. He looked at me with something between pity and disgust. For God's sake, man, listen to yourself. I recalled my confinement following Angel Meadow, hearing the voices but fearing the asylum. My answers were not those of a rational man, and I knew it, despite them being honest. From that point onwards, I gave them nothing further. When they finally released me that afternoon, no evidence to hold me, though suspicion clung like coal dust, Pennyman was waiting on the station steps, immaculate as always, pencil poised above his ever-present notebook. Uncanny Uskwood emerges, he called, loud enough for the constables behind me to hear. Tell me, Inspector, did the spirits instruct you to break the poor woman's neck, or was that your own initiative? I pushed past him, but he matched my limping pace down the street. Our readers are fascinated by your proclivities, he continued. First the Angel Meadow business, then Longburn's unfortunate conflagration. Now a séance ending in death. One might detect a pattern. Print what you like, I muttered. You always do. I merely report the truth, Uskwood. His smile never reached his eyes. Speaking of which, I understand you and Miss Thorne had a prior correspondence, a private invitation, most intimate. I stopped, turning to face him. How could you possibly know that? Something flashed across his face, satisfaction at having caught me off guard. I have my sources, he tapped his notebook, just as you have your voices. 2 days later, the coroner's report declared Miss Thorne's death the result of a seizure, a tragic medical event. No mention of floating bodies, no ether streaming from mouths, no voices from beyond. And 3 days after that, Pennyman's article appeared in the Courier. I read it over breakfast, my tea growing cold. Uncanny Uskwood, madman drives medium to death. The article painted me as a deranged obsessive who terrorized a vulnerable young woman with accusations until her heart gave out from fright. It quoted sources close to the investigation, and hinted at my unhealthy fixation with the supernatural. The final paragraph was the knife twist. One must wonder how many more must perish before the authorities recognize the danger Mr. Uskwood presents, not to the spirits he claims to hunt, but to the living who cross his path. I folded the paper carefully and added it to my case file. Another piece in a puzzle I couldn't yet see clearly, but I would. I sat at my desk, the notebook open before me. For hours, I'd stared at the blank page, my mind replaying the horror of Miss Thorne's final moments, the way her body had bent, unnatural as a puppet with cut strings. The voice, that voice that wasn't hers. Finally, I dipped my pen and wrote only 7 words. Seek the boy, for he holds the answers. I traced each letter carefully, as if the mere act of recording them might reveal their meaning. The boy from Longbourn, his pale eyes, his knowing gaze. He'd saved my life without speaking a word, then vanished into the smoke. Rain lashed against my window, the rhythmic drumming like distant machinery. I rose, wincing as my bad leg protested, and limped to the glass. Manchester spread below, a dark canvas streaked with lamplight and shadow. Somewhere in that maze of streets and alleys, the boy was hiding, watching, waiting. I pressed my palm against the cold pane. The city had changed since my days as an inspector. Or perhaps I had. What once seemed solid now appeared permeable, the boundary between the seen and unseen as fragile as Miss Thorne's sanity had proved to be. I'll find you, I whispered to the rain-soaked darkness. I had to, before Penniman twisted the tale further with his poisoned pen, before whatever lurked beyond the veil claimed another victim. I returned to my desk and opened the case file. Newspaper clippings, sketches of sigils, notes on the foundry fire, fragments of a larger pattern I couldn't yet discern. I added Miss Thorne's final words to the collection, then closed the book. Tomorrow, I would begin my search, not as the inspector I once was, bound by rules and reason, but as the man I'd become, limping, doubted, haunted. The man who had seen beyond the veil and lived to tell the tale.